This tutorial will look at handling headshot models produced from photos where the subject is not in a neutral expression. If you're familiar with image editing, you can of course edit the original photo before headshot model generation, but you can also adjust for expressions in headshot itself. Now, the subject in the photo here clearly has an open mouth, and because headshot produces models using the convention of subjects having closed mouths, you can see that the lips are distorted and don't match the photo at the lip seam. The way to fix this is to use headshot morphs to match the inner lips, and there are two special morphs designed to allow you to do this in the headshot mouth lip seam folder. These are for opening and closing the upper and lower inner lip geometry. So, in exactly the same way as morph alignment to photos where subjects have closed mouths, the approach here is to use the morphs to match the open mouth. And by combining use of the inner lips morphs with other lip seam and mouth morphs, you should be able to make a reasonable match. And once you're happy with the alignment, the next step is to reproject as normal. Now, this approach produces a better match with the original photo, but it's important to understand that further adjustment is required to make the model suitable for animation, since currently the face is not in a neutral expression, and this means that any subsequent animation will be affected by the open mouth. And since the mouth is already open, I can see that the model's teeth aren't well aligned, so before neutralizing the lips, I'm first bringing the teeth here roughly into line. Now, the next step is key. Just below the inner lips open and close morphs, there is a morph for closing the whole lips, which can be used to bring the lips back together. And beyond this fundamental step, it's also worth using other morphs where appropriate, such as to raise the jaw slightly if needed, and also to balance out and further neutralize the original expression. And this principle of aligning to the subject's expression, then reprojecting and then neutralizing the expression with morphs, can be used to correct open mouths, including smiling and frowning, as well as to correct full face expressions, which I'll demonstrate shortly. But now that this model's mouth has been corrected, you can see that closed mouth expressions now work correctly, and this will make for better lip sync and general facial animation. Next, we'll take a more complex example where the whole of the subject's face in the original photo is in an expression and the model as a result is far from being neutral. You can see here that the subject's mouth is slightly open and that this has caused a similar issue in model generation to the previous example. So, just as before, I use the mouth morphs to better align the model to the photo, including the upper and lower inner lips. And in this case, I perform a couple of morph and reprojection passes to produce a decent match. And again, this is exactly the same process as when improving the alignment of models to photos where the subject is already in a neutral expression. And to get the best results possible, just as with aligning to neutral expressions, it makes sense to take your time and work as carefully as possible, being aware that by properly aligning to the expression, whilst it does make for a more accurate model, the model is not yet animation ready since it still needs to be neutralized. Now, the previous example was straightforward because the open mouth was the primary issue, but here the full face expression requires much more adjustment, and the approach, just like correcting the mouth, is to use headshot's morphs to effectively balance out the subject's expression, to make it more neutral so that it will animate more naturally. So the task in this case is not only to balance out the mouth and jaw, but also the other features which are involved in the facial expression. And it's worth noting that if you're working on a model where the subject's face is visibly wrinkled from the facial expression, you can also use external image editing of the photo diffuse texture to reduce the wrinkles and improve the neutral further. And whilst you can edit the photo diffuse and update skin textures through headshot when correcting expressions like this, it's important not to reproject when correcting expressions, as this approach is deliberately altering the original photo alignment. So finally, just to sum up, there are essentially 3 steps to neutralizing facial expressions in headshot. First, you improve the alignment as usual, including any open lips, using the headshot morphs. Then you reproject, and especially if the expression is complex, You can do multiple passes of morphing and reprojection until you're happy with the match. And then finally, it's a matter of using the morphs again to neutralize the expression in order to produce a model which is better for facial animation. Thanks for watching.